Hello, welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for our 8th grade students, although anyone is welcome to join in. This lesson is the third in this week's series. My name is Mr. Ayers, and I am an 8th grade ELA teacher for Tennessee Public Schools. I am so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. If you didn't see our previous lesson, you can find them at www.tn.gov/education. You can still tune in to today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others, but it might be more fun if you go back and watch our other lessons, since today we'll be talking about things we've previously learned. Today we will continue learning about a short story called The Gift of the Magi. Specifically, we will finally learn what gift Della decides to buy for Jim. We'll see not only what gift she buys, but how she plans to give it to him. Before we get started, to participate in our lesson today, you will need paper, pencil, a surface to write on, and the student packet for Grade 8, Lesson 18, which can be found at www.tn.gov/education. If you can't print the packet, please don't worry about that. Just get some notebook paper and write some notes down and follow along in the lesson. All right, are you ready to find out what happens next? I am. Let's get started. Today, our goal is to continue reading a short story called The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry, so we can analyze the text to determine its meaning. We have been reading this text for a couple of lessons already, and there will be more lessons to come on this text. Because this is a longer text, I had to cut out a few portions of it so we can be sure to finish it. But don't worry, you'll still have everything you need to understand it. We will begin today with me reading portions of the text, and then we will reread it and pause along the way for deeper understanding. At the end of the lesson, I will assign you independent work you can complete after the video ends. Let's briefly revisit yesterday's independent work that you completed. Yesterday, we explored O. Henry's use of several literary devices, including imagery, allusion, and metaphor. We learned new vocabulary words, and we read about Della's sacrifice of selling her hair, one of her most prized possessions. For your independent work, you responded in writing to the following prompt. How does the author's craft, use of literary devices, character development, setting, and vocabulary develop the story, The Gift of the Magi? In a brief essay, using your graphic organizer and your notes from today and yesterday, explain how the author writes. Be sure to include new vocabulary and specific examples from the text. Let's take a moment to read the essay that I wrote. In the short story, The Gift of the Magi, O. Henry employs a variety of literary devices that engage and entertain the reader. O. Henry relays a narrative that describes two main characters, Della and John Dillingham, on Christmas Eve. O. Henry's use of allusion, simile, and imagery helps readers to be intrigued by, visualize, and relate to John and Della's predicament. O. Henry uses allusion to help readers to fully comprehend the value the characters place on two prized possessions of the main characters, John's watch and Della's hair. The author alludes to Queen Sheba's jewels as he describes how treasured Della's hair is. The author also uses allusion by referencing King Solomon's treasures when describing how important John's watch is to the couple. Both the Queen of Sheba and King Solomon are famous royalty, and by alluding to them in the story, O. Henry helps readers understand just how important these two items are. The gift of the Magi also includes several similes. For example, the author describes Della's hair rippling and shining like a cascade of brown waters. This simile not only engages readers, but it also helps readers picture that Della's hair is beautiful, long, and flowing like a waterfall. Additionally, the author uses imagery to intrigue and entertain the readers. The imagery in the short story also helps readers to form a mental image of the characters, plot, and setting. For example, after Della sells her hair for $20 and is finally able to buy Jim a Christmas present, the author says Della ransacks the stores for the perfect gift. Because Della's character is not portrayed as a thief or a wild creature, ransacking stores helps the reader to picture her shopping in a mad rush, searching diligently for the perfect gift. By employing allusion, similes, and imagery, O. Henry's lively writing style keeps the reader's mind entertained and helps the reader perfectly imagine the main characters, Della and John. Whew. Okay, so I'm not saying that's a perfect essay or that yours needs to look exactly like it, but it does do a few things that I definitely hope your essay did. First, it has a clear opening that previews the content for the reader and a clear conclusion that sums everything up, with well-organized paragraphs in between. Second, as the prompt asked, it includes a couple of our new vocabulary words, cascade and ransack, plus literary terms we're focusing on like allusion and simile. And finally, it uses specific evidence from the text to support its points. If you don't have the whole text in front of you, you may not have been able to use direct quotations, and that's okay. But I hope you still use your notes and memory to write out specific details. Okay, let's continue the short story we have been studying. As a reminder, although the events of the story or the plot are fairly easy to understand, the author tells this simple story in a complex way. Sometimes telling things in a more complex way gives those things layers of meaning, which is important because the more layers of meaning there are to dig into, the more we learn about ourselves and the world around us. And that's the challenge for us as readers. All right. So here's how we're going to continue doing it today. We'll only read a couple of sentences at a time, and then we'll dig into the puzzle of seeing what the words mean and what the author is talking about. To help us with this, we will use the graphic organizer we used yesterday to track our stories. It looks like this. You can see that we have certain sections on the organizer labeled as various people or things, characters, key details, plot, vocabulary, and literary devices, which are tools like metaphors and images that the author uses to convey meaning, and themes or important messages. This will be important, and it will help us as a tool as we continue to work through the text. Take a minute now to make sure you have your graphic organizer from the previous lesson or to draw a new one for today. As we read and discuss each of these elements of the text, we will pause and give you time to write your notes onto your graphic organizer. We'll actually be using this organizer all week, so please keep it handy throughout the lesson and the rest of the lessons of the week. Okay, now remember yesterday we learned about Della's quest to find money to buy Jim a gift for Christmas? We learned that even though Della's long hair was a source of pride for both Jim and Della, she was willing to cut it and sell it for in order to get enough money to buy the gift that she wanted to buy. We don't know what that is yet, but we're going to learn today. All right, so let's continue reading the text. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim and no one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores, and she had turned all of them inside out. So let's pause real quickly here. The text says she, meaning Della, found it at last. The it is the gift she's been looking for to buy Jim, but we don't know what it is yet. The author hasn't told us, but we'll find out shortly. But what does it mean when the author says Della turned all of the stores inside out? Unless Della has superpowers we don't know about, we know that the author is not being literal here. He is using figurative language. What do you think he means? Sometimes we use the phrase turn something inside out to mean search through something thoroughly. That means Della went through all the stores and searched through almost everything they had. What does that help teach us about Della? Yes, she is persistent. She is dedicated to finding the perfect gift for Jim. But why would the author use the phrase turn the store inside out instead of just saying searched all through the stores thoroughly? Why would he use figurative language here? Well, because figurative language can really make something more interesting or engaging to the reader. It brings the story to life and makes us as readers better visualize what is happening. It made me visualize in my head that Della was going through every store and looking at every item. So let's take a moment and add what we have learned to our notes on the graphic organizer. Let's add to Della's character on the organizer that she is persistent and she is dedicated to finding the perfect gift for Jim. Under literary devices, let's add figurative language. And under the meaning section next to it, add that it is non-literal language that helps readers to visualize what is being said. Great. All right. Now, let's see what she found. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. Okay, that's a little bit of a tough sentence, so let's unpack it piece by piece. As we discuss difficult vocabulary words and their meanings, be sure to add the word and its meaning to your graphic organizer. Okay, so the narrator said it, meaning the gift, was a platinum fob chain. Do you even know what a fob chain is? It's the chain that is attached to a watch for carrying it in your coat or pants pocket. Go ahead and add the word to your graphic organizer and write down its meaning. This is what we call an old school watch that you keep in your pocket instead of on your arm. The text goes on to say, or it says, platinum fob chain. Okay? So what does platinum mean? Platinum is a type of metal that is grayish white or silvery white in appearance. It is much like gold in value and quality, but it is different in color. Let's go ahead and add that word and meaning to our graphic organizer as well. So now we know what the gift is. Let's see how the author continues to describe it. He says it was chaste in design and that it proclaimed or stated its value by substance alone. What do you think the author meant by saying it proclaimed or stated its value by substance alone? It seems like what he was trying to say is that the chain is so nice itself that it didn't need any fancy wrapping or extra gadgets added to it. It was just that nice of a chain. So, knowing that, let's look at the whole sentence again because we still have a couple of difficult words to figure out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone, and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. So we still need to figure out what chaste in design means. But wait, when I look at the sentence, it looks like everything that comes after the phrase chaste in design is defining what it means. So we may have really figured it out already. We've learned that the author says the chain is simple and it does not need any fancy wrapping or gadgets added to it. So chaste in design must mean that it is simple by design, and that's a good thing. The other phrase, not by meretricious ornamentation, is just another way of stating that too. It doesn't need artificial ornaments or gadgets. It's beautiful in its simplicity. Let's take a few moments to add a couple of these words to our vocabulary notes on our graphic organizer. First, add chaste, which means simple and undecorated. Second, add meretricious, which means flashy and artificial. That seems like a long sentence with a lot of tough words to describe the chain. Why do you think the author would use such detailed description of the chain's simplicity? Take a moment to write your answer on a sheet of paper apart from your graphic organizer. So my thoughts are the author really wants us to see how Della viewed the object, why she valued it. She did not value it because it was the fanciest chain in the world or the most expensive. She valued it for its simple beauty, and that was the type of gift she wanted to give to Jim. Since this is an important detail about Della, let's add it to the section about Della on our characterization chart on the graphic organizer. All right, let's keep going. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew that it must be Jim's. It was like him. Quietness and value, the description applied to both. Interesting. I wonder why the author capitalized the watch. What do you think? Remember yesterday when we talked about the two possessions the Young family valued the most? What were they? One was Jim's gold watch that had been his father's and his grandfather's. The other was Della's hair. So when the author says it was even worthy of the watch, he is saying that Della found the perfect chain for the watch he inherited from his family. She even says this chain is much like Jim himself, quiet and worthy of admiration. We've spent a lot of time talking about the chain. Let's see what happens next in the story. $21 they took from her for it, and she carried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. Wow, she barely had enough money to buy it. Remember, she started out only with $1.87. She sold her hair for $20, so she had a total of $21.87. So it wasn't just selling her hair that brought the watch. Her saving money before that helped to buy it too. Let's look at that second sentence again. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. What do you think Jim would be anxious about the time in any company with his new gift? Well, that depends on what kind of anxious he is, right? The word anxious can mean that you are worried or stressed. Another definition of anxious, though, is that you are eager or that you want something a lot. Let's look at the sentence one more time. With that chain on his watch, Jim might be properly anxious about the time in any company. With a fancy new chain to hold his watch on his arm, he is not likely to be worried or stressed, right? He will want to show it off. So that's what the author is saying here, that Jim will be happy to check the time when anyone is around, because he can show off his new gift. Before we forget, let's add both definitions of anxious to our vocabulary list on the graphic organizer. The first meaning of anxious is worried or stressed. The second meaning of anxious is eager or wanting something a lot. All right, let's continue. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on the account of the old leather strap that he used in place of the chain. What do you think the author means by that sentence? Well, let's break it down a little bit. Maybe another way of saying grand as the watch was is as fantastic as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly. What do you think the author means by on the sly? You know how we often say keep it on the DL or on the down low? It's the same thing. The word sly means secret or private in this sentence. Let's add this word to our vocabulary list, graphic organizer. Sly means secret or private. So why is he looking at it on the sly? Because he doesn't have a fancy platinum chain yet. The text said that he's been using the old leather strap. So even though he has a really nice watch, he still needs a nice chain to completely be proud of it. Until then, he's a little embarrassed and keeping it on the sly. Okay, so Della has bought the chain and is on her way home. Let's see what happens next. When Della reached home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. We know that Della is crazy excited about finding the perfect gift. The sentence says her excitement gave way a little to prudence and reason. What do you think that means? You know how sometimes you get so excited it's hard to think straight? Well, that's what's happening to Della. But she realized when she got home that she needed to get her act together and be wise because she needed to get ready to give Jim his gift. Wisdom is actually the meaning of the word prudence, which you may not know. Let's add that word to our vocabulary list. Great. Now let's see what Della does when she gets home. She got out her curling irons and lighted the gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. So remember that Della has cut her hair, and her hair was a prized possession in the family. So in order to keep Jim from being too disappointed by her hair being cut, she needs to fix it up. That's what the author means when he says that she needs to repair the ravages made by generosity added to love. Ravages are the damaging effects of something. Let's add that word to our vocabulary list. The author is saying Della is not only repairing the damaging effects of cutting her hair, but also the damage of her being so generous and loving to Jim. It cost both of them prized possessions. The next sentence is related to this, so let's take a look. Which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Do you remember the huge elephant-like animal called a mammoth? Well, that's not what the author means here, but the word mammoth here does mean huge. Let's write that vocabulary word down. So the author is saying it is always a huge, tremendous task to repair the ravages or damages of generosity and love. What do you think he means by that? I think he means it is very honorable to be generous and loving, but sometimes that leads us to make decisions that can be costly. Sometimes there can be unintended negative consequences for very honorable decisions. This helps us to understand Della's character a bit more. What does it tell us about her? That Della is very generous and loves Jim greatly. So much so that she is willing to deal with the negative consequences of having to cut her hair to get him a gift. Let's add the following to our notes on Della. So loving and generous that she is willing to deal with the negative consequences of love and generosity. Okay, let's see what Della does to prepare for his arrival. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant or absentee schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long, carefully, and critically. Wow, so she fixed her hair into tiny curls that made her hair look more like a traditional cut for a schoolboy. It says that she looked at her reflection for a long time. I guess if you had hair as long and beautiful as she had, it would take a while to get used to such a different look. Let's see what she was thinking. If Jim doesn't kill me, she said to herself, before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what can I do? Oh, what can I do with $1.87? So it's obvious that she's a little nervous about his reaction. She said if he doesn't kill her before he takes a second look, he'll say she looks like a Coney Island chorus girl. What in the world is that? Well, Coney Island is a famous amusement park in New York City. During that time period, chorus girls who sang as part of the group were known to have untraditionally short hair. So the author is using Della's character to compare her appearance to that of a Coney Island chorus girl. Do you remember what is called when the author makes a reference to something that is designed to call something to mind? You wrote it down yesterday. Yes, an allusion. The author is making an allusion by referencing the Coney Island chorus girl. This allusion is more difficult for us because we did not live in that time period and do not have a clear reference. But readers at the time would know exactly what he meant. The allusion here is designed to make a comical or humorous reference to something in society. This makes the text more interesting to read for the reader. Let's take a moment and add this to the meaning section beside allusion, which you already have in your notes from yesterday. Great. Let's take one more look at the last couple of sentences in the paragraph before moving on. But what can I do? Oh, what can I do with $1.87? So she's thinking to herself, there's nothing else for me to do. I couldn't buy anything with such a small amount. So let's keep going. At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. So she is getting everything just right for his arrival, making the coffee and cooking dinner. She wants to make him as happy as possible, so maybe he'll overlook the hair issue. Let's see what she does. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand and sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. So she has everything ready now, even having the gift wrapped in her hand and sitting on the corner of the table near where he comes into the house. Then she heard his step on the stairway down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a little silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty." Wow. So that's kind of suspenseful. Remember that suspense is a state of feeling excited about what's going to happen next. The author creates this suspense by using sensory detail. Sensory detail is when an author uses language that appeals to your senses to help you understand what is happening better. Let's take a moment and add sensory detail to our literary devices list on the graphic organizer. Be sure to add to the meaning section beside it as well. You'll add there the effect of sensory detail on the reader. So now that you know what a sensory detail is, let's look at the paragraph one more time. As I read it, try to identify what sensory detail the author uses. Then she heard his step on the stairway, down on the first flight, and she turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a silent prayer about the simplest everyday things, and now she whispered, "Please, God, make him think I'm still pretty." Which ones did you notice? I picked out, heard his step on the stair away down on the first flight. She turned white for just a moment. She had a habit of saying a silent little prayer. Now she whispered. Notice all the details bring you into the scene to experience the quiet and the nervous awaiting of Jim's arrival. It makes me almost as nervous as Della. She is very nervous that he will judge her and she will lose value in his eyes, that she won't be as pretty to him. But the problem with suspense is sometimes you have to wait and see what happens. And with that, we're out of time today. But if you tune in tomorrow, you'll get to see his reaction to her haircut. We need to take a few moments, though, to make sure we have everything in order in our notes. Okay, so now that you've had a second to finish up your notes, let's think about what you need to do for your independent work. As we reflect on today's lesson, we learned new vocabulary and we learned about literary devices that authors use, such as allusion, sensory details, and figurative language. For your independent work today, please respond in writing to the following prompt. Explain the ways the author helps us to understand Della's character. Include details from the story today, as well as what those details reveal about Della's character. Use 3 of the vocabulary words in your summary. Thank you so much. I know we went a little long today, but it is such a good story. Thank you for reading with me The Gift of the Magi. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson in Tennessee's At Home Learning Series. Thanks so much. Goodbye.